WeWork CEO told the WallStreet Journal that a company can find their most engaged employees by looking at who wants to return to the office, stating that those that are the least engaged are very comfortable working from home.
Democratic strategist, CEO of Pine Street Strategies, Don Calloway, culture editor at The Federalist, Emily Jashinsky, they join us now to discuss. Emily, let me start with you. There was a lot of consternation around this, and actually there was a previous, I think the Washingtonian editor had come out and given an interview basically saying, look, if you don't come into the office, like we're going to take benefits away from you and bump you down to contractor status. The Washingtonian people freaked out. A lot of people freaking out about the WeWork thing. This is a major cultural flashpoint right now. So what do you make of it?
It is, and it's actually, this is going to intensify as the sort of work from home, then like as buildings reopen basically, and companies want people to come back into the office. There are a lot of bosses, I'm sure, that are so sick of leading their teams as they're working from home and want to see people in person. And that's going to create a huge tension between people who have really come to acclimate to working from home and sort of built it into their schedule as parents with their children's school, et cetera, et cetera. So this is only going to intensify. WeWork's incentives here kind of are interesting. They obviously want people back in the office. You'd think maybe that this new like blend of work from home and work from the office would be great for WeWork, which is a struggling company, a flailing company anyway. But actually when they were thriving, it was, to the extent you could say they were thriving, that was when people were working from their offices. So it's actually, they need companies to want people to have their butts in the seats. So that's the incentive here. And that's the model that they're betting on.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Exactly.
WeWork sells office space. So they have a bit of a financial incentive to be like, you got to be at the office, guys. Otherwise, you're not engaged here. Don, I think this is a war on parents. And I also think it's a war on introverts who may have preferred being at home and been more productive, working from home and actually able to get their work more efficiently done.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Emily's exactly right that WeWork is not the proper messenger for this because they are in the nature of needing people to be in the office. I think that what we've seen develop over the last more than a year now is that the innovators and disruptors of the world are giving paid time off and work from anywhere. Just get your shit done. Meanwhile, the dinosaurs and the troglodytes of the world are saying, come back, and you have to come back. I think we have to recognize that more than just the actual physical malady of COVID produced a psychological wound. And that takes time to get over, even if everybody were fully vaccinated and the world were fully opened up today, starting right now. You have to give people time to ease back into this and get past the psychological aspects of what COVID did to folks. Folks simply might not be ready to gather, to get together, to convene in one place, and you can't force them to do so. And it certainly doesn't mean that they're less engaged or less productive as employees. I think that's extraordinarily short-sighted on WeWork CEO's part.
So it's interesting, Emily, too, outside of what WeWork wants. I think the backlash to this does tell you something very profound, which is that there is like an organic worker backlash, especially within the PMC, against having to go back into the office. And it's really a war against like bosses in terms of how you see with Goldman Sachs and all the banks trying to get many of their employees to come back and they don't want to do it. A lot of Silicon Valley tech companies are just going full remote. Many of them, I saw one company even canceling the lease on their office saying, look, we hear you. You can work wherever you want. So I'm curious how you think this is going to filter down through the economy over the next couple of years.
It's so weird. And I'm also curious of what it's going to do to our cities. Some of these parts of cities are built entirely around, workspace. And so I think that's going to be fascinating. I think we're starting to see those tensions mount right now. People who say, listen, this works really well for my schedule. And then bosses who say, we got to have you in the office, et cetera, et cetera. But to say just blankly that just the blanket description of people who aren't ready to go back into the office or don't want to go back into the office if they're not your most engaged workers is ridiculous. And it's, I think, indicative of the fact that WeWork actually needs companies to say we're going back to offices, for the most part, full time, because the part-time model doesn't work at all for WeWork. Because if you're sort of splitting time, that WeWork space is actually not going to be good for you. And that's an interesting sort of pivot from where our economy was headed, where the WeWork space was going to be great for you, to where it is now, where companies are going to say, listen, we can either just cut costs by totally just having no brick and mortar space, or we can have the brick and mortar space and people can get in here and they might be able to manage their time differently, 3 days in the office instead of 5, but you still have the space.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is the more time you're in the office, the more control the bosses are able to exert over your lives. And that's what this fight and this tension, I think, ultimately is really about.
Yeah.
Guys, fascinating discussion. Great to see you both.
See you guys. Thank you.
See you guys.
More Rising for you after this.